The Ministry of Human Rights said is a statement that Al-Houthi militia is based on the rooftops of citizens and that they use hospitals, schools and places of worship as barracks for their military actions. It is a war crime and flagrant violation of international humanitarian law and international human rights law and the four Geneva Conventions. The ministry is monitoring and documenting the violations committed by Al-Houthi militia and forcibly bringing children into the fights and using them as fuel for their war, the statement said. The Ministry of Human Rights was surprised by the long silence of the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights, condemning these actions and crimes committed by the militia, despite the government's continuing calls to carry out their moral and professional duty and to take necessary action towards such practices, while stressing the Yemeni government's commitment and respect for international humanitarian law and human rights law. The ministry said that the government, having executed all means to convince the militia of Hodeidah to give up the city of Hodeidah. The National Army Force managed to impose a tight siege on hundreds of members of the Houthi militia in the positions in the front of Marwan in Saada province. A field source in the 3rd Brigade Al-Uruba said that the brigade's forces carried out during the past few days the largest successful operation on the sites and areas of the concentration of the Iranian Houthi militia in the area of Marwan. The source explained that the process of circumvention was 15 kilometers and extended from the Al-Aqaba of Marwan to the Al-Aqaba of Shadda in Razih, which fell in many villages and strategic highlands. The operation resulted in the death and wounding of more than 200 members of the Iranian Houthi militia, while the National Army is surrounded by hundreds of Kurds in their positions of concentration. Residents of the city of Hodeidah said that the Iranian Houthi militia stormed dozens of houses in the residential areas of Al-Hodeidah city and blazed them inside by force. They looted other houses during their escape after the great progress made by the National Armed Forces and the giant of the city. They also raided shops and private institutions and looted them before they fled to residential neighborhoods in the city center. The sources explained that Al-Houthi militia is in an unprecedented state of confusion after the rapid progress of the National Armed Forces and the brigades of giant to the depth of the city makes historical situation in the laying of mines and explosive devices indiscriminately and exposed. The Houthi militia carried out a brutal and unprecedented crime in Hodeidah in retaliation for civilians and in response to the victories of the joint forces. They was able to clear large area inside the city of Hodeidah of mines and improvised explosive devices in residential neighborhoods and roads, which were a great threat to the lives of innocent civilians and contrary to international norms and laws that criminalize the laying of mines and targeting civilians in time of war. The Iranian Houthi militia resorted to diabolical tricks to continue harming the citizens. Their criminal elements planted mines and explosive devices inside the bags of sugar, rice, and fire extinguisher, and then planted them in citizens' homes, public roads, and government buildings in the city of Hodeidah in retaliation for the rejection of the militia and its terrorist practice. Where the Iranian Houthi militia faced popular rejection against the presence of its elements, who retaliated by turning hospitals, schools, and places of worship into targets for their missiles and turning many neighborhoods and areas inside Hodeidah into minefields. There was sharp differences between the leaders of the Houthi militia coup in Sana'a, Hodeidah, and Hajjah. Local sources reported that the leaders of the Houthi Large announced its rejection of the orders of the leader of the militia Houthi coup, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, and managed itself from itself. The sources pointed out that the differences are due to the defeats and losses suffered by the Houthi militia coup and retreat in various fronts of fightings, especially on the front of Hodeidah. Academic sources at the University of Dammar confirmed that the Iranian Houthi militia and the university president appointed by the Houthi militia under the supervision of the so-called University Student Forum imposed money in exchange for graduation from the university and starts this week. The sources said that the Houthi militia required the graduation students to pay 50,000 riyals in exchange for allowing them to hold their celebration in the Hall of Palestine of the University of Dammar, and prevented any ceremony outside the university, and it is unacceptable. The sources said that the militia required the banning of any songs at the graduation ceremony and committed the revelers to run the group's dignitaries at the ceremony, in addition to presenting the subjects of the ceremony to the presidency of the university before the start of the celebration. This comes in light of the tightening of the screws on the sources of funding of the group and in light of the successive defeats sought by group on more than one front.